Hello and welcome back to the Arcarius Podcast, where I, your host, Tristan.
Whoa. Why are you the host?
I'm taking over this episode for today.
No, you are not. Where I, your host, Nevin, and my co-host over here,
Tristan.
will be telling you about the game, a wonderful game of
Warhammer 40,000.
He's trying to take over the episode. Let's get this over with quick. So, our topic for today. We will be talking about the actual game of Warhammer 40k, the dice rolling, the model marching game of Warhammer 40k, and the game we love to play.
Yep.
So, Tristan, you want to give us the general explanation of how the game's played?
Of course. So there's a few ways to play 40k. We're going to go over the standard. So there are 5 stages in every single game. And within those 5 stages, there are 2 turns, and each player has 5 stages in said turn. So stage 1 is going to be the command phase, and then we go to the movement phase, the shooting phase, the charge phase, and then the fight phase. You want to go through the command phase?
Sure. Command phase is generally probably the most boring of the phases, and unless you're a Knights Lords player, and it is the phase that most people like the least. It is where your abilities will most of the time come in, not always. And it is where you take battle shock tests, which decide if your troops are afraid or they're stalwart.
Yeah, so battle shock it had a bigger impact in older editions, but when it comes to 10th, it doesn't do as much as it used to. So battle shock now only adds, it doesn't add, it takes away the ability to control a point.
Right.
So a unit that becomes battle shocked has 0 control points.
Right. We have our reference sheets here. For me, I have the Tyranids and the Termagants. Tristan had the Terminators, but he knocked it off the desk.
Whoops.
But on the cards, we have the leadership value, the LD. It is on the Termagants. It would be the 9+. Now, when you're rolling for it, what you do is you take 2 dice, you roll them, and you add up the score. If it is higher or equal to the leadership value, so if on the Termagants it is 9 or higher,
yep,
you will pass for battle shock, and your units will be just fine. If it's under, they will fail battle shock. And when they fail battle shock, they lose something called OC, which is objective control. On here, per Termagant, it is 2. And if they lose that, it just means you won't be able to control points with them.
So the one thing about battle shock is that every army is different, every unit is different, but it is generally that that unit that is battle shock cannot control a point anymore. Yes. Like I said, there are different rules. For example, Dark Angels, they have a rule where every unit always has an OC of 1, even if the unit is battle shocked.
Right. Okay. So that's the first phase. That is the command phase. The next phase is the movement phase, which is arguably the most important phases of all. It is where you move your models here up the board depending on their movement value. Their movement value is the M on their cards, which is, for the Termagants, 6 inches.
And for a Terminator squad, for example, would be 5. So the movement phase is when you're able to move your units anywhere on the board, as long as they're within said movement phase.
Right.
Yeah, within their movement range. You can do something called a double move, which you would have to roll a dice for. Sorry,
that's
advanced.
Yes.
Where you roll a dice, and you would take, however, the value of the dice, and you would add that onto your movement. But
right.
You give up the ability to declare a charge and some other rules.
Right, you won't be able to shoot unless your weapon has the assault characteristic, and you won't be able to charge unless you have a special rule that allows you to advance and charge in that turn. And we say it's the most important phase because it is your units have to move up to the board to get in range of other units to shoot. They have to stay behind cover to not get shot at if they're a very important unit to you. They have to position correctly. They have to gain objectives to control or secondary objectives to win extra points to win the game. It is most likely the most important phase in the game.
Yeah, unit positioning is also a very important tool that you have to your like ability. If you can get unit positioning down, you can win almost any game,
Right.
in my opinion.
The next phase would be the shooting phase, where self-explanatory, you take your models and go pew pew against the other models. It isn't that basic, but it is what you're gonna do. So on my Termagant sheet over here, they have one ranged weapon, not the base kit wood, not the normal kit they sell, is just the start collecting wood. They have one weapon. It is called the flesh borer. It has an assault keyword, which basically means they could move, advance move as well, and then shoot. This weapon has an 18-inch range, which is just the range it can be used at, no further than that, but it can be used at with whatever range within the 18 inches. They have an A score of 1, which A is equal to attack, so each Termagant that has this weapon has 1 attack with it. Then it gets onto the BS score, or ballistic skill. It is what you have to roll to make this shot hit something. Now, on this, it is a 4+. So for every model in your unit, let's say we have a unit of 10, you would roll 10 dice. Every 4, 5, or 6, so 4 up, would hit. After it hits, it goes to its strength characteristic, which on this is 5. And from that, you would take your strength characteristic and compare it to the toughness characteristic of what you're shooting at. So if you compare it to the Terminators, Jason, what's the Terminator's toughness?
Terminators have a toughness of 5.
So if you're comparing it to the Terminators, 5 strength to 5 toughness is equal. So that means you would have to roll, again, another 4 up. So you take whatever hit in the first roll, you roll it again, and every 4 up wounds. From there, we would compare my AP skill to their save skill, and I have 0 AP on this, so it wouldn't do anything. He would take every hit that wounded and roll a save dice. For him, that would be 2 ups, so 2, 3, 4s, and 5s, or 5s and 6s. And he would roll those, or he would roll them, and for every 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, it would make a save, which means he would not take that damage. For every failed one, so every 1, he would take 1 damage per.
The one thing to note, though, when you are shooting, it is a model individual based shooting. So it's only the models that can see the other models in that unit. It's not a whole unit shooting at another unit. So if you have cover, for example, and you have maybe 2 Terminators behind the cover, but you have 3 Terminators that are just around the corner, only those 3 Terminators that are around the cover that can see the model can only shoot. The 2 behind cannot shoot because they're not in line of sight.
Right. Damage can't overflow. So if you have something with 3 wounds and your attacks do 2 damage each, if only 2 attacks got through, that would only kill 1 model. It would not go over into the next model. It has to 2 damage would not kill it outright, the first one. So it would have to use the second one that went through to kill it. And that 1 extra damage would not overflow into the next model.
That's what we're trying.
Right. Now, Tristan, do you want to get on to the first of the Ooga Booga phases?
Yes. So the lovely melee combat phase.
What?
But before we go into that, it's the charge phase. So the charge phase is when you have units that are close together and you have to close the distance in order to get within engagement range. Engagement range is within 1 inch of the model that you are trying to attack. Now you have to roll 2 dice in order to see how far your unit would move in order to
it has to make a charge move, and to do that you take
2 dice.
You measure the distance between your models. If it is within 12, you can charge. Or if it's 12 or lower, you can charge. You then take 2 dice, roll them, and add it up. If, let's say, these 2 models were 6 inches apart, you'd have to roll a 5 to get a successful charge. If you roll under that, they can't charge in that turn. If you roll 5 or above, they're charging 2 1 inch, and then they will proceed to pile in on the enemy. Charge phase is the only way to get into melee combat other than being charged. It is very important that you make your charges, and you make your charges successfully, and make them with an idea of, oh, if I send this one in, it will win, instead of oh, I'm going to send this one in, and it's most likely going to die to the Terminators because my Termagants are ranged only. You decide what you want to charge in, and you make sure it is meant to be in melee.
The one thing about 40k is because there's so many different armies, you do also have to remember each unit also has special rules. Most of the units just follow general rule of thumb, but something like jump pack assault intercessors for Space Marines, they do have a impact when they land. So for every unit that's able to impact D6, and they get 1 mortal wound for that.
Right. So everyone in base contact, you get a mortal wound roll for.
Yeah.
All right. Now on to Tristan's favorite phase, the Ooga Booga phase. No, not yet.
I'll allow you to do it.
I'm taking it off that page so he can't press it. He loves the pipe sound.
He won't let me use any other sound. But
you're allowed to use any other sound. You just don't know what any other sound is on here.
Sounds good. That's fair.
Like we have this.
Oh, I didn't know that. So going into the fight phase. The fight phase is the hard melee phase of the stage. Melee, you have melee weapons on your data sheets for every single unit. One thing to note, though, is that if your unit is weaker in melee and you're charging a melee strong unit, that unit does get to fight back after you have attacked them, if you are the one charging.
Right.
Yeah.
But you can choose not to fight back. You can charge in and just choose not to fight. So your opponent would have to wait to the next turn. So that means that unit wouldn't be able to move. Your unit will most likely die, but the important unit that you're most likely charging into won't be able to move, which is pretty important. So there is like tactics where you use chaff to just bog down other units, but that's a bit more complicated than we need to get into. Basically what happens is you charge in, you will most likely choose to fight because you're charging something in that can fight, and you will duke it out in melee. You swing swords, and you do all the fun stuff.
Indeed. Oh, lovely.
When you least expect it.
So it's similar to it is to shooting. Fighting in melee is something along the same idea. You have a number of attacks that you have per unit. Let's say we're going to be using the Terminator squad, and let's say they are using their power fists. So in order for me to roll an attack against Nevin's Tyranids, I would have to, however is within the engagement range. This is very important.
So it's not engagement range exactly for that. Engagement range is just getting your models into engagement range with charge. When it comes to deciding how many units can attack, it's different from shooting, where it's not just what you can see and what's within range. It's the first row that's in base contact, and then this row behind them get to fight. Anything beyond the second row cannot fight in melee.
Sorry, my mistake. But let's say they're using Power Fist. So each Power Fist has 3 attacks. And so you'd roll those, and you'd roll your 3 attacks. And instead of ballistic skills, you have weapon skills. The Power Fist here hits on a 4+, and the Power Fists have a strength of 8. So compared to Nevin's Tyranids,
which is toughness 3, so that is the strength is more than double my toughness, which means he only has to roll 2+ on every single one of those dices to wound.
So you would roll those, AP -2.
Which means I have a 5+ save, which means I don't get to roll a save thing. So anything that runes automatically goes through onto my Termagants.
And each does 2 damage, even though Nevin's Termagants only have
one wound. Each wound will kill 1 Termagant, and the damage won't spill over, as we said before.
Yeah, as we said, it's something to explain. We had that issue before where we forgot about that. So
we forgot about that, and a tank took out, what was it, 12 Termagants
in one go? Yeah,
that was my bad for not searching up that rule. I still won that game though.
I did use a Gatling cannon though after that.
Yes, he decided to use it. I still haven't played the Termagants since, or Tyranids at all since, just because I don't want to give him the satisfaction of that. But that is the 5 phases of each stage that we have to go through to win. Now to recap, it is the command phase, where you do all the command things. Then the movement phase, which is the most important, where you move your things up the board, put them in cover, put them in a way to shoot things. And then we have the shooting phase, where you pew pew from range. Then we have the charge phase, where you get into melee, 12 inches or less, and you roll dice and you get into melee. So you can... Then we get into melee, where we can... I'm not going to press it this time, but where you get to bash the other person's face in.
Yes, the fun part of just going, yes, power fist against a person. Just
So from there, we can move on to the how you play the game. So the game is played in a couple different ways. You can do the basic way of just taking the other person's models off the table or until they forfeit. Or you can play it in the way of points, where you set out a bunch of objective markers and you capture them and play. And for every one you capture, you get a certain amount of points depending on the mission. There is also a third option, which is player versus environment 1, PvE, where you and 1 to 4 buddies can play as allies against a simplistic AI, which puts hordes of models towards you. That is called horde mode and is our personal favorite way to play the game.
It's sadly not an official version of Warhammer, but it's your game. You get to play it however you want.
Exactly. It is made by the Warhammer Podcast. I'll put a link into the description. You should very much so go check them out. From there, we will talk about the point one, where you put out, it's usually 5 to 6 objective mats.
Yep.
And you choose a mission. It will become from a mission pack. You can buy them from Games Workshop or search up on the fan-made ones. And it'll tell you from rounds 2 to 5, you can capture these points, and they will give you a certain amount of points to win the game. Usually it is 5 per point, 5 per round. So if I have 3 points captured one round, I get 15 points. And then if I capture another one this next round, I will get 15 plus 20 points, which is 35 in total. And you just go on and on and on until the end of the 5th round, where you tally up both points and see who wins. If you get tabled on this one, you don't automatically lose, but you lose the ability to capture objectives and continue getting points, so you most likely lose.
I mean, you still can lose in the points one if you get completely tabled. If you have no units, then
you can still continue if you have no units. Depends on how you want to play it, but from there, you also have something called secondary objectives, where you're given these objectives to do secondary things that aren't capture the mats. And some are kill the enemy warlord, which is my favorite. If you kill the other person's warlord, you get 5 points. There are control the enemy's home objective, because there's usually 3 in no man's land and then 1 at the place where we deploy.
Yep, either end of the base.
You capture your enemies, you get a bunch of extra points, and just go on and on from there.
One thing I did realize we did forget to say is when you are starting off, you do have to roll. You roll off with the person with dice, and whoever gets higher gets to decide who goes first and who goes second.
Right.
It is, like you said, a turn-based. So you go through each 5 phases, and then the other person goes through each 5 phases, and you go in that order for the rest of the game.
Yes. So, you roll off, see who goes first. Then you go through your 5 phases. Next person goes through their 5 phases, and that's battle round 1. Then you move on to battle round 2. You don't roll off in this battle round, and the first person who went last round goes again and does their 5 phases. The next person, that's battle round 2, and it goes on for 5 battle rounds.
Or until someone
forfeits or loses.
However you guys to play it.
Right. Yeah. Now, you can play it however you want. You can shift the rules around to make it a little bit more friendly to how you guys play, or you can play it strictly by GW's rules. It is all up to you. This is your game. I can guarantee you will most likely not be going to tournaments, just like we won't be. And you'll be playing just how you like to play. Sometimes it's best to smudge the GW's rules a little bit just to make the game a little bit more playable and a little bit more fun.
Fun is always something that you should keep in mind if you're just there sitting mindlessly. I mean, switch things up a little bit.
make things a bit more exciting. And if you guys want to come up with your own like missions, go for it. It is encouraged by us and other podcasts to do so. There's a bunch of fan-made mission packs out there on the internet for you to try and use in your games. It is probably one of the more fun things to do, and it just takes away from the monotony of playing GW's mission packs over and over again, especially right now when they only have Leviathan out, I believe.
Yeah,
and that's the only one we play, and it's getting to the point where it's like
it's still fun, but I mean, after a while, you go through everything. Yeah,
right. I think we've covered everything when it comes to playing the game, Tristan.
I think so too.
Any final remarks for us?
Have fun out there. It's your world.
Perfect. Thank you guys for joining us on the Arcarius Podcast. Would you like to do your trademark thing?
Thank you for coming to the Arcarius Podcast. I hope to see you guys in the next episode. Take care.
Have a good day.